Something in your throat there, Ephraim.
It seems like every time I eat someone wearing metal, it gets stuck in my throat.
Are you eating guests again?
No, I promise these are not guests.
Alright, but if I see one more bone in my room, we're gonna have an issue.
I'll try to swallow them whole.
Alright.
That's what she's... Not gonna go there.
Yes, please don't, especially since it appears we have someone here with us.
This is not where, you wouldn't happen to be a part of the Shadowlancers, are you?
No, we are the Delegation of Dreamers, not the Shadowlancers.
Okay, that would have been a much more interesting conversation with everyone else. I don't think I'm ready to fight a dragon, 2 dragons, and, I'm sorry, who are all of you?
I am Rue, and my race is Cephalotus Fae. I know most people haven't seen one of me before.
If you have issues pronouncing it, don't worry, we do too.
Noted.
I can pronounce Rue just fine.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Ephraim.
And I am Ashra.
Did you have a teleportation mishap?
It would seem so, though it's surprising, considering the God of Knowledge himself teleported us. Well, no matter. I'm Galadriel Ambercrest.
Pleasure to meet you.
Yes, nice to meet you. Maybe he sent you here for a reason if he's all-knowing.
Also, I would like to know which God of Knowledge. There's a few in the different realms.
Oh, our God of Knowledge is Ayun.
Ah, yes, that's one I've heard of. Okay.
We can try to send you in the right direction if you wouldn't mind just answering a few questions first.
No, I don't mind. It might take off the nerves a little bit. Seeing potential old compatriots, not fun, necessarily.
Oh, were you part of the Shadowlancers?
For a time.
Actually, I apologize. Where are my manners? Welcome to Delegation of Dreamers. Would you be alright if we ask you a few questions?
Oh, yes, of course. I don't sense any, ill will from you all.
Just don't go near Ephraim's horde, you'll be fine.
Noted.
But yes, please tell us about the Shadowlancers.
Well, the Shadowlancers, they're quite a group. They mostly are a secret organization used to do covert operations, usually for not the best of reasons. Their leader, Damascus, a cruel one, he indoctrinated me himself, and boy did he make quite a time of it.
Quite a time, as in took a long time to teach you?
More grueling training sessions, and when he eventually saw potential, he would... Well, he made me his personal torturer. Anybody who he deemed a spy or someone who had some knowledge of organizations that they didn't like, or that higher-ups, or whoever hired us, wanted information out of, we would send them to me.
So were you a group of assassins?
You could say that. We would assassinate, we would protect, we would raid. It honestly depended on who hired us.
So, in a matter of speaking, you were sellswords.
Yes, funnily enough, being a sellsword got me into their group.
You were one beforehand.
Yes, for about 4 or 5 years.
How did you get into that line of work?
Well, truth be told, I'm a knight of Darkor. I was a knight for quite some time, until a man named Ezekiel, my captain, decided he wanted the woman that I loved, and he decided the best way to get that person was to either frame me to kill her, or for me to run away. And, well, I'd rather not kill the one I love, and so I did just that. And to keep her protected, I changed my name and hid away doing odd jobs here and there.
And what made you decide to leave the Shadowlances?
Well, it's rather hard to talk about, but when I was torturing people, I never liked it. It wasn't fun for me, but I knew my way around a blade. Until there was this one woman. She was strong and stalwart and never gave up any information. Hell, I don't even know if she had any information, but eventually I was told to just kill her off. They saw no reason to keep her around, and when I was about to do it, she looked at me with those stern golden eyes and just told me she forgave me, that she knew I was doing what I had to do. And that broke me. I lost all faith in myself that day. I realized I was going against everything I stood for. My title as a knight should be ripped away. So the first chance I got myself out of there.
And that's when you met your new friends.
Yes, actually. It wasn't right away that I left the Shadowlances. It took some time and planning, but eventually I was assigned to be posted up an office room of the queens, the Queen of Ivon, Queen Maria. Well, I shouldn't say that, I should say Catherine, but for ease I'll say Maria. She was to meet one of our benefactors, we'll say, Keaton, who was the advisor at the time. She met with him in the office, and he was planning on killing her there and then, but through some magics, which I can only assume was from the party, she disappeared, and that sent all of the Shadowlances into a panic. Keaton told us to fan out, and he told me specifically to find her and kill her. And I knew at that moment, as I was running down the hallways of the castle, I knew I had to get them out of there.
And you helped them all escape.
Yes, it wasn't easy to convince them to let me lead them out, but I was able to tell them, us Shadowlances, we had a sort of telepathic link, and so I was able to hear which hallways patrols would be going down, and was able to weasel our way out, though Keaton did eventually find us at the entrance, and, well, we had to fight our way out at that point.
And was he disappointed that you betrayed him?
I'm not sure. I wasn't necessarily the highest rank in the Shadowlances, after all, but he was impressed that I would go against him, though it would make sense as to why he put used all of his abilities on us. It was quite a fight. Sadly, one of our party members had perished at that fight, and I couldn't help but feel it was partially my fault.
And what about your cohorts? They helped you escape.
In a way, yes. They were heroes before I even joined up with them. Well known, in fact. They had quite a few feats. But seeing them in person was even more amazing than I had imagined. Sailor was able to cast some amazing magics, and Bjorn was able to transform into interesting animals and use those against Keaton. Maria, she was very impressive with a sword and shield, and Barney, I'm not quite sure what he was able to do. He used a bit of a mixture of magics and melee. But I'm sure I would not have been able to escape if it wasn't for them.
And what about you yourself? What fighting style do you use? You said you were a fighter.
Yes, back then I was quite adept with a sword and shield. I still am, but I'm getting a little more acclimated with single sword now, but back then it was sword and board all the way.
And why the change?
Well, a change in upper management, if you will. Or, in my case, lower management? My patron, if you will, Mephisto. I don't know if you all are familiar with Mephistopheles. It might come off as evil, I know, but I assure you I'm not here to gain your trust and steal your horn.
Yes, I've heard of this Mephistopheles. I've met some people who follow them, and they're not all bad people, so I trust you well enough. But you also seem to have a lingering touch of another god. I think this one might be the one known as Pelor.
Ah, now that is an awkward situation. See, when Sailor, the one who perished during the fight of Keaton, when we had defeated him, we gathered around her and did our best to resurrect her. Maria prayed to the Raven Queen, Bjorn prayed to Avandra, and I, not having a god at the time, just prayed to anyone, asking for some hope from somebody who's willing to lend aid. I didn't care who, just it was partially my fault that she fell, so I was hoping somebody would recognize that in hopes of some forgiveness, but bringing her back. That's when Pelor reached out to me, and he honored me with his blessing, and gave me some small hope, though it was in vain, as we weren't able to revive Sailor, at least in the traditional sense.
And, you have some magic items with you. One of them stands out more than the others to me. The one that seems to have been transformed by Mephistopheles.
Oh, yes, Magma Cleaver is what we've called it. Quite a blade. It actually used to be a mace. It was able to channel electricity, and when doing enough attacks, it would build up a charge, and I was able to release it at will. But now, Mephistopheles had altered it slightly, so instead of dealing lightning, it was able to call forth magma and expel that from the blade. It's quite an interesting sight. I'm not quite sure if I should be wielding it, but I'm honored nonetheless.
Yes. And, would you tell me a bit about the other two magic items that are with you? It seems your gloves are magic, and the shield you bear.
Oh, yes, the returning shield. It's quite an interesting story about that one. In the beginning of my travels with the heroes, we ended up finding ourselves in a lake. There was some man who was having trouble catching fish, which, I didn't think too much of it until a giant shark came jettisoning itself out of the lake and trying to attack us. We were able to defeat it, though, and strangely enough, he gave us all a magic item, and that's where I got this shield. It's quite an interesting little thing. You can throw it, and it'll come right back to you whenever you want. It's come handy in quite a pinch, knocking enemies down.
That would be quite useful.
Yes, it definitely has. And these gloves, they're known as the Frost Gloves, or Gloves of Frost. I've never been able quite to remember the name, but they were actually given to me by my mother. I didn't know it at the time that she was my mother. We had made a brief trip in the Feywild, and she had given them to me. They were used in the final battle against the Black Rot, and I was able to destroy it, though I did sacrifice my life.
Very noble. Sacrificing yourself to destroy something which sounds quite deadly.
Believe you me, if you saw it in person, it would terrify anyone, even dragons.
Oh my. You said you died. How did you come back?
Well, not even my friends know this, but I was whisked away, and I thought that was it. It's over. Until I found myself in an open field full of just tall wheat, gently waving in the wind, and that's when I met the Raven Queen. She seemed a lot more kinder than I had first imagined, and she offered me a choice, whether to move on and let the heroes continue on without me, or continue to aid them whenever I can, and I had just gotten to see Alexandria again, the love of my life, and I knew that the worst was far from over for them, and I knew I had to help them, so I couldn't move on yet. So she let me come back.
Did you have to strike a deal with them?
Surprisingly, no, though I think it does involve Maria involving herself with the Raven Queen. She has gotten quite the favor with her.
See.
What sort of favor?
Well, we recently had just figured out, by Ayun, of all people, that the Raven Queen had chosen Maria from birth. I guess it had something to do with her not being born with any magical talent, even though her family were supposedly had quite a bit of power within them. But I am not on the best of terms with Maria, so I don't really pry into her life.
That's fair. And can you tell us a bit about your party?
There's my best friends, Barney and Sailor. Barney is quite the character. He hails from another country, Mediterranean. We mostly reside in Rochalia. Mediterranean is a northern continent. He's rather silly. He's a vampire, of all things. Though I don't think most of the party knows that, but he trusts me enough to tell me that. Sailor, on the other hand, she's very set in her ways. She has a strong sense of justice and wants to bring hope to all of the people, which I can get behind very easily. Then there's Bjorn. He's very wise. He, interestingly enough, was a bear before he became a gnome. So his natural state is bear, though I can't quite remember how that came about. But nonetheless, he's very wise and was actually the first person I opened up to in the group. Then there is Maria. Catherine is what I normally call her. She was once queen, but after the Blackrot incident, we were whisked away and lost a year of time, and in that time, I knew her a lot more than I wanted to. I guess you should say, never meet your heroes. She was once a very honorable person, but now I see her as someone who will just do whatever she can to save the day, even if that means sacrificing her friends. Though she has some goodness in her, I can't lie about that, but yeah.
How come you call her both Maria and Catherine? Does she have two names?
Everyone calls her Maria, and I used to call her Maria. Habits die hard, I can say. But after watching her just kind of devolve into someone that just broke every understanding I had of her, she's not the person that I looked up to before. And so I want to separate the person who I believed in and the person she is now. So I call her Catherine.
Ah, yes. I understand how you feel about that. It is sometimes horrible to have to come to terms with something you thought was good and turned out to be not as good in the end. Even if it has a good intention, it's not always the best. And speaking of having to meet your heroes, I have a former arrangement with a certain god that I must attend to. So I will be leaving these two to asking you some more questions.
Is it Lyndon?
Yes,
Alright, wish him my best.
I will. He's still upset that he feels forgotten, even though he's not. So,
If he was, he'd be here.
yes, I know. But farewell, Galadriel. Well, it was a pleasure meeting you.
And it was a pleasure for me as well.
Galadriel, you've told us about your past, you've told us about your party, and now, what's the current quest you are partaking in?
Well, there's quite a few on our plate, to be honest. At the current moment, however, Catherine, as I'll call her from now on, funnily enough, she became a lich, though not on her own free will. What remains of the Shadowlances have stolen her phylactery, and we are seeking to get that back. Along the way of heading to a town known as Coastview, where we are to meet another party from Mediterranean who have information on a special artifact that will be useful in defeating the menace known as Talrog.
Talrog.
Yes, known in our world as the god of evil.
Oh. You seem to be running into a lot of gods.
Oh, yes, was definitely not part of my plan when joining the heroes, but what can you say? We are the first heroes of Rochalia, after all.
Wait, the first heroes? So you joined the first party of heroes?
Yes, Rochalia has a history that I myself am not quite familiar with, but it would seem that this place definitely is in need of heroes, and we are the first ones to really step up to the plate. After all, the world seems like it might be coming to an end any day now, and the gods are trying to get their fingers in as many pies as possible.
What sort of pies?
Well,
I believe he means metaphorical pies, my dear Ephraim.
Well, what do they taste like?
definitely not like strawberry, I can say that.
Okay.
Each one of us have at least one god who, well, that's a little different for Sailor and Catherine, but Bjorn aligns himself with Avandra, the god of nature. I myself, Mephisto. Catherine, she used to fully align herself with the Raven Queen, but now I believe she aligns herself with, what is her name? It's some god of maybe protection? I can't remember, it's fairly new. I don't believe Bjorn aligns himself with anyone, though I haven't asked him. I'll have to do that when I see him next. Sailor used to align herself with Palor, but something seems wrong with her lately. I guess Palor has cut himself off from her? I'm not sure why, though it could be because I've technically fallen from grace. And there is one more party member I forgot to mention, Alexandria. She, at least from when I was with her, aligns herself with Bahamut.
And do you all gain different abilities from your gods? Do they grant you boons, or do they help you, or is it just pray to them and they might? Gods are fickle. I've learned that.
Well, we don't necessarily talk gods with one another very much, but I know Mephisto has given me quite a boon with my new Blood Hunter abilities. I believe Bjorn has as much better ease with transformation, with aligning himself with Avandra, though I'm not sure what Sailor or Alexandria have gotten from their gods.
Have you ever had to call upon your gods in a moment of danger?
Thankfully, we're able to, for the most part, handle situations with our strengths alone, though we often pray to them in times of confusion. I have actually a very close relationship with Mephisto. We made a deal that we wouldn't treat each other as god and servant or leader and follower, but more as equals. So we're actually in contact quite a lot, though it is rather strange not hearing him in my head currently.
He's most likely cut off from you at this current moment. This is a bit of a special realm.
I can tell. It's honestly, it's actually a little nice, not gonna lie. It's kind of nice having my head be my own.
Trust me, with Ruin Ephraim, I can never get out of my head. What are some of the highlights of your journey so far? Some of your favorite moments?
Oh, well, fighting that shark was, all in all, quite an interesting battle. I was able to deal the killing blow. I was able to misty step my way back when I was in Eladrin. After aligning with Mephisto, things got a little wonky, and now I'm not quite sure what I am, but I was able to teleport above it and was able to slam down with my battery ram, causing a shockwave of electricity, sending it all through the shark. It was quite a feat of mine.
That's rather impressive.
Yes, it definitely boosts the self-esteem a little. Another feat that I feel proud of was saving a town known as Bloodrock. It was originally being overrun by these strange men in these black coats and bowler hats, and they would whisk away people into a large manor up on a hill, and they would either never be seen again or would come back different. And we were able to find out that a secret organization was actually doing tests of black rot on the civilians.
What is black rot?
It's a sort of disease and organism. It's a little mix of both. It was made by a hag in the Feywild by a person who worked under Talrog. She made the black rot, and it's sort of a, let's say, if you have a small chunk and put it on any organic material, it will quickly spread and eat and grow and just consume anything that isn't living until there's nothing left. It will go through water, air. It's quite deadly.
So what was their experiments about?
Well, from what I could tell, they were testing on different races. It would seem that when used on different, either gnome, human, Eladrin, elf, the spread would vary. It was quicker on humans, but back when I was Eladrin, it seems it would spread significantly slower, though there was no real way to stop it.
So they were doing good tests to see if they could stop the spread.
That is a gray area, my friend Ephraim. They're doing experiments to stop it, but they're also doing experiments on living, breathing, thinking creatures without a possible antidote.
Well, I mean, if the end result was to save everyone else, maybe that was a good thing.
It honestly was more... The group is more of a middle, a grey area itself. They don't align themselves with good or evil. They simply gather knowledge and use that to get the best outcome for the most people. So if they have to deal and understand with a entity that eats anything and everything, they're going to align themselves with those who might be able to know how to stop it. Now, it did take quite some time for me to make them realize that they're not working on the right side.
How did you convince them?
Well, after we stormed their secret operations, Bjorn and I were able to have a discussion with one of the members. His name was Kingsley. A good fellow. It was sad he passed away recently, but we were able to give as much information as we could without giving too much away, for he was actually working with Keaton at the time. But when we faced off Keaton for one final battle, he actually took the bookkeepers, who were the secret organization, and, well, I guess they're not secret anymore, and he actually aided us in defeating him, though it wasn't without casualties.
How many did you lose?
We didn't lose any, but Kingsley and a few other bookkeepers lost their lives. Kingsley was able to live for about a year after, but I hear it was a agonizing year for him.
I'm guessing that's one of the lower points in your quest.
Yes and no. We were able to save a town and set it on a path that would be able to let it flourish. It's now become a fishing town, I hear, but definitely was not my finest moment. In that battle before being able to talk to Kingsley, I rather flubbed up quite a few times, and I still to this day beat myself up over it.
How do you beat yourself?
Well, I don't physically beat myself, but it is my duty, after all, as a knight, to protect everyone, be noble or peasant.
Even yourself?
Well, when you bring it up like that, that's one way to think about it, but...
So how do you save yourself from beating up yourself?
I don't, honestly. When something goes wrong, I will dwell on it, and I will let it fester inside of me, and use that anger and sadness to push myself to not let that happen again.
Okay. I got one last question for you. Do you know how to make a metaphorical pie?
He's getting really into baking these days, but I fear that he might be misconstruing a few things.
Well, I mean, you could get metaphorical apples.
Alright, well, that's a start at least.
Alright, I have a few more questions for you, if I may. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
No, yes, of course. Anything you need?
Can you tell us a bit about your relationship with Alexandria?
Oh, boy, is that a doozy. Well, I first met her back when I was a knight in Darkor. We met in a bar. I don't often go out to drink, but I figured after one grueling training session, why not? And that's when I met her, and I just instantly fell in love with her the first moment I saw her. Golden eyes and her dark black hair and her tan skin just took my breath away. And then she proceeded to punch me for staring at her. She definitely knocked me off my feet. But after that, we slowly got to know each other, and love for each other began to grow and grow and grow until we were almost inseparable, until eventually I had to leave. It was heartbreaking for me to leave her like that. I was planning on marrying her. I even had the ring, all prepared and ready, but I just guess it wasn't meant to be at that time.
Why were you fighting when you met her?
It wasn't...
You said she knocked you off your feet.
She thought I was leering at her. Just a man staring at her in a bar, and she's quite a feisty one, so she doesn't take anything from no one, and so her instincts is to punch first to ask later.
I see.
Ephraim, let me ask you a sincere question. Did you just eat that book we got you?
It was metaphorically good.
I'm going to get you an e-reader. But my next question, how did you get in contact with the god Mephisto? What led you to going to them?
Well, after my little foray in a world where everyone despised the heroes, which just turned out to be almost a time capsule in a way. It wasn't even real. I was rather down. I had no belief in my friends. I had no belief in myself. And that's when I met a man named Leftlet. He promised me that he could help make me stronger. He saw potential in me, and he agreed that people putting labels on me and on us was just something we both didn't like. He didn't like being called a god. I didn't like being called a hero, and he gave me a deal. If I helped him find his daughter, he would give me power. So I did. I found his daughters, which turned out to be a sort of friend of the party's, and after a brief incident of trying to clear some misunderstandings, it eventually led to me making a deal. I would work for him if he would allow his daughter and, by proxy, his other daughter, who he didn't even realize was with the party at the time, to stay in the material plane.
Why did they want her to stay in the material plane?
They grew tired of living in the Nine Hells. They didn't like torturing people and having those who sinned cry out in pain day in and day out, and eventually wanted to see the world, and so they struck a deal with her father, and when he let them in the material plane, they just simply never wanted to go back. It was a little bit my fault of having their father find them, I'll admit. Not my finest moment, but we were able to clear it up in the end.
At least you managed to do that. What would you say would be one of the funniest moments upon your quest? And what would be the most epic that you've had?
Well, funniest would be... There was one time where, after we had fought these nasty spider creatures, Bjorn and I decided to... No, it was Bjorn and Rivali, another frequent party member of ours. The three of us decided we'd play a little prank on the party. So we had Bjorn transform into one of those spider creatures, and Rivali and I beat ourselves up and made ourselves look like we had just gotten into a seriously bad scuffle when we ran into our camp, just yelling and screaming that the spider creatures were coming back, and they were coming in full force, and that we had to get ready to fight. And then Bjorn came scuttling in, trying to scare everyone, and we were laughing. Rivali and I ran into some tents and got ourselves all cleaned up and pretended as if nothing happened, and everybody was so mad at us, and though I did end up angering some of our party members, it was quite worth it.
And what about your most epic?
My most epic? Well, I think, all in all, our most epic moment was defeating the Black Rot. See, Alexandria, Barney, and Sailor and I went into a fortress where the Black Rot was flowing from, while Bjorn and Catherine stayed behind by a weakened part of the Feywild that connected to all other planes. Bjorn and Catherine were able to fend off waves of goblins and monsters and catapults, protecting the Facespring, as it is known, with all of their might, and were able to do glorious works and were cleaving wave after wave of enemies, while the rest of us were storming this fortress, bypassing traps, defeating the hag that created the Blackrot, sneaking past a chimera, and eventually destroying it. Though it was a intense moment, Alexandria, Arnie, and Caleb had been captured by the Blackrot and were starting to get eaten away, but I was able to plunge my hands with the frost gloves and rip it apart, and one defying act was able to slay it once and for all. It was, while terrifying, was honestly our finest moment.
Sounds like a high note to be sure. And with that note, I believe we have run out of time, but if you wish to stay a bit longer, allow yourself some relief from your god so that you may still have your head for a bit longer, feel free to do so.
Yes, that would actually be quite nice. I'd like to see how one would make a metaphorical pie.
I'm sure Ephraim can show you to the kitchen.
Well, I was hoping you'd teach me, but sure.
Well, it can be a learning experience then.
Have a good awakening.